Hi, this is Professor Randall Rudd, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about our guest lecture for today. His name is Ken Ashe. Ken, I've known for many, many years, and he's been wonderful to work with every time I have. Ken and I have worked both here and in Hollywood together on any number of projects for any type of things, even from cat commercials for Japanese television to stuff for Disney and all kinds of stuff in between. Ken founded and was executive producer for a company called 1080 locally. It's a production and a post-production company that thrived here in San Antonio from 1977 to about 2013. He had a staff of up to 120 artists, animators, editors, and directors of photography. If you are more interested in Ken, you can visit his website, www.kenashe.com, if you'd like to get more information on him. Ken is a graduate from Trinity University here. He has a BA in TV and journalism, and his affiliations, he's a member of the Producers Guild of America, as well as the International Third Society. He's had experience as an executive producer on any number of projects, as well as a producer itself. Some of his credits include Jurassic Fight Club, which is a History Channel program. He worked on some specials called, for example, Lost Book of Nostradamus and Nostradamus 2012, Easter Island Eclipse. Ken has received numerous awards in our industry, which is to be very much impressed by. He's won Telly, he's won a Clio, he's won Addy Awards and National Council of Churches Film Award as well. But really, Ken is I think, a very articulate gentleman and will make for an interesting lecture. So I'm going to turn it over at this time to my friend and producer, Ken Ashe.
So yeah, thank you, Randy, for letting me join your class. Hello, class, virtual class. I've done a few things with virtual classes, and it's interesting, to say the least. This will be a memory for you that you'll recall in the future and repeat. Oh, remember that time when we had to be in virtual classes? I don't know, maybe they'll all resume and everything will be back to normal and we won't do this anymore, but I have a feeling it may stick. This may be the wave of the future to save on brick and mortar expenses for businesses and schools alike. So as you can see, I'm talking to you from my Beverly Hills home, and this is the assured path of a producer. If you're going to be a producer, this is what you can expect.
I did not warn the students about the lies that they're going to hear, so sorry about that, students. Busted.
It's a virtual background. I'm sure they couldn't tell that. If you've watched Parks and Rec, what was the name for that premiere show they did, the recent one? There's some funny stuff in there. I feel like the old guy that, couldn't figure out how to punch the button and all that. Anyway, so the truth is about producers in general, I think Randy wanted me to talk and address the role of a producer in this world. It's one of those roles that crosses over to so many areas of the business. Sort of like I've always envied makeup artists because they can work still shoots, they can work weddings, they can work commercials, they can work film, they work all the time. There's sound men and cameramen and other people specific to this world are limited to a degree. A producer is sort of like a project manager. We can do really anything. It's really sort of like a construction foreman. You want to make sure that you have the cement poured at a specific date, and then the lumber shows up at a date after that, and check the rain schedule, make sure the lumber's not going to be laying out there and get rained on, and then you got to get the people to show, blah, 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 blah. It's just, that's all it is, really. It's like making a cake. You want to make sure you have all the ingredients on the shelf before you begin, and then it's easy. Alfred Hitchcock said about this business that when he shows up on a set, it's all done. It's now just fun for him because he wrote everything. Every detail about the shoot was included in his script. And that's a producer's dream, to work with a director like that. Most directors don't do that. They show up and ask you to ad lib, or they'll pull something out of a hat. I was on a set once. It was a big shoot for Coca-Cola. Actually, we had three spots going on that day. We're in a park, had 3 different crews working, and the director decided he didn't like the jingle the kids were singing to, so let's redo the jingle. Well, I'm out in the field. So we took the sound man and we took the track with the voices already on it and played it back, and the kids sang a new song over that. You have to improvise. You just have to do it. If that's what they want, let's do it. Figure out a way. Where there's a will, there's a probate, I always say. Where there's a will, there's a way. I'm a member of the Producers Guild of America, which means I get to pay them $370 a year, and I get the screeners, and I get to vote on the Producer Guild Awards. And all of that is really meaningless. But one thing that I do enjoy about the Producers Guild is being able to get on the forum and talk to other producers if you have a problem or something that's maybe you haven't encountered, they have. When I produced the show, we did a special for Nat Geo called Eclipse Easter Island. And in that show, we actually had a live feed from Easter Island during the eclipse. And to do that, we had to send down equipment that would broadcast a live feed, a little satellite setup. And sent the engineer down there early, thank goodness, because there wasn't but one generator on the island and it didn't work. So that had to be addressed first, got the generator working. Had to send down the live uplink satellite gear via a very slow boat. It stopped in Hawaii, then it stopped in Chile, which is, a province of Easter Island. It was stopped there by customs for a week. Finally cleared that, blah, blah, blah. It finally happened, went off without a hitch. Just before that equipment was set down, the engineer discovered that he had ordered the wrong kind of satellite uplink. It turns out in the Southern Hemisphere, you have to have some kind of reverse polarity spin. I don't even know the name for it, but a satellite uplink that normally works in the Northern Hemisphere will not work in the Southern Hemisphere. So put that in your memory banks in case you ever have a similar issue, which I doubt you will. That's the thing about production in general, is that every day is a new day. There are new challenges. Woody Allen says, every day a fresh new truckload of compromises arrives at the front door, and that's exactly right. And producers, I remember explaining to a fellow I was working for once, we did a Christmas special on the Riverwalk, and we had some celebs down there and all that. And I had a conversation something like a week before with this producer who was from the networks, just talking about what producers do. And I said, well, I think my simple definition is we solve problems. So we got on location and we're shooting something down the Riverwalk, and the videotape, back in those days, we videotaped, stopped working. And this producer looks at me and says, well, problem solver, what are you going to do? I said, so I got another video machine in there and we recorded it. That wasn't a big challenge. I mean, you don't go on a project like that with one option. You have to have backups, and backups are essential. And the more you produce, the more you learn that, right? So being a member of the Producers Guild, I went ahead and called up something I've seen there before, because I've been asked before, what do producers do? And other than being a problem solver, and they don't even list that among the items, what they do say, and you can read, is, we initiate, coordinate, supervise, and control. And then they go into some legal definitions about it. This really brings up the concept of the second definition of a producer, executive producer, the types of producers. Sometimes the executive producers don't do anything except get a credit on the screen, and they, literally don't do a thing. They probably have something to do with raising money, or they work for an organization that just has that name on the door and they get a executive producer title, period.
Or they may be a Tom Cruise whose name would lend a lot of credibility to the project, although they know he won't have anything to do with it once they get funded. Yeah.
And a guy like Tom Cruise, or some of these people, when to get movies made, you really need attachments. You have to have big star attachments, and all of these guys have gotten hip to the way to maximize their money. Well, let's say their agents and their managers have. So they all have production companies, and they all require a billing of executive producer. And it's a monetary thing, as well as Randy well points out. You know, these studios need them, and they need their name on there. That draws in a big box office. Just a simple name like Tom Cruise is going to bring in what 12, 15 million more. I don't know what the number is.
How many pictures have been released that were executive produced by Steven Spielberg? You know,
yes,
of the ones that he had actual involvement in, right. I would say it'd be less than a handful.
Probably. My guess is he's one of the few executive producers that actually probably does spit in the soup. He probably does at least have something to say about who he hires to do something.
Yeah.
Like, I think he's the guy who founded J.J. Abrams. And, you know, I think that he's probably an exception. But then again, there's been so much done under his name that I'm sure you're right, Randy. There's bound to be things that he doesn't even know has happened.
Yeah.
But yeah, so executive producers can take a role of doing nothing but raising money or doing nothing at all. And so as the Producers Guild of America, we're not a union, we're a guild, and we have very little actual influence legally. But one of the big things of the last decade in the guild has been a function of policing credits to try and make sure that people do things on the screen that actually are reflected in the titles. An associate producer performs one of the more functions delegated to him by the producer. This really starts to sound like, and it is, something like, you know, you delegate, you sit back and eat donuts and hire delegates. You delegate the work to other people. But that's true to a degree, and some producers probably do take advantage of that. But what I found is that when you're producing something that's structurally difficult, you really need to have islands. You know, if you have when we did Jurassic Fight Club, I know something about animation, but I'm not an animator and I can't talk their language. So you have to have a producer that's strictly producing the animation arm of that. Now that producer reports to me only because I'm in contact with the client, and I'm going to know if something is different than what they want, and I'll pass that on to them. But they have to have control of that world, and you're better off with delegating those kind of things out.
Say, Ken, I don't think I've run across the credit of animation producer. Have you, as a separate category?
Yes, there are people who there may be a title that's different than quote producer, supervisor.
It's not one that we see here on the DGA, but there has to be some liaison between the guys who know that's 42 frames versus the guys who, you know, I mean, it is way too technical.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what happens is, and I think, you know, the term probably, the Producers Guild is slow to refresh their stuff like everybody is. But I think the term that I'm looking for is supervisor. So you have a supervisor of special effects.
Yeah.
And a supervisor in that category, in that term, I think essentially performs the functions of what I would call a producer of animation. But you're right. I don't think that term has actually been coined, but I'm coining it now. I'm trademarking it, and I expect for all you guys and gals who are out there and going to be producing things in the future to credit me with that.
Well, it was always my impression in Hollywood that the old school guys like the DGA and the Directors Guild and Producers Guild are not that anxious to hand over any of their territory or their turf, in this case, to animation or to computer graphics especially. There's always been this reticence. They're the new guys. They're the usurpers to the kingdom. I know there was initially a great deal of resistance toward bringing in computer graphics into movies because the fear was they would replace actors. And, you know, you've heard that for 30 years. I mean, maybe someday when the uncanny valley closes, but it's not there yet, you know.
This brings me to one of the biggest functions of a producer is to be a referee. There are historic antagonisms in this world. Directors, they just are antagonistic to usually the agency producer or the producer at the network or the filmmaker. There are butting heads. I've had directors who refused to grab a wide shot before we left a scene because they didn't want it, and they knew that they might put it in, and then the agency's saying, no, I want the wide shot. Well, what do you do in that case? I mean, it's difficult to monitor some of these age-old things. I remember when Cinevid Assist came out, this was a big fight and everybody hated it. The directors didn't want to slow down the set. They didn't want to give instant dailies for people to review. They certainly didn't want their actors to see it. A lot of directors won't allow actors to see dailies. They think it might interfere with their performance and they might start doing things they want to do instead of what the director wants. So that was a fight. And Randy is right. The resistance to graphics in general was pretty strong. I think it's probably now settled down. You have people in the camp that are the James Cameron camp where, yeah, they're going to be making fully animated films, I'm sure, in the future. But they're not going to be the majority of them. And I agree. I think the uncanny valley will never be solved. I'm just going to say that. Man will never fly, and the uncanny valley will never be solved. There will be something about, no matter how good it gets, there was going to be something that's going to tell you that's not real.
It's interesting, Ken. I'd say at this point, in my estimation, we may be 90% there, but that last 10% will take more than the combined efforts of where we've gotten this far. There have been some versions. In fact, I'll show them to the class. There's just something that came out recently where they did some music videos with a synthetic actress, and some of the shots are passable, but some of the shots are not. But I would have to agree. I'd be very surprised if I'm ever going to be fooled to believe that's
100%. And you may not say, "Oh, that's fake." There'll be something in your gut that will, that was not real. If you really repressed it to make an opinion or give an opinion about it.
Well, Ken, getting back to the business of going from resistance to computer graphics to what I feel like now is almost a dependence on computer graphics. Now that they can do anything, directors tend to want to put everything in every movie. You know what I mean? There's an over-reliance, in my opinion. I feel like computer graphics have been sort of I think they've shifted the importance from story over to technology. We can do this thing where story traditionally was what made a film. What a Casablanca was a Casablanca, not because of the technology. It was because of the writing and the story, which some of the better animators, John Lasseter, for example, recognizes the importance of story. And some of the folks I've talked to, even about speaking to this class, are going to be talking to them about the importance of story over the technology.
Yeah, sometimes technology dominates, and it's sad when that happens because, as you point out, really it should serve the story, not the other way around.
Right.
And it's something that does happen. We call it in the film world, and Randy knows this, is referring to something as a practical. Do you want to do that as a practical, or do you want to do that as a CGI or animation? Because a practical would mean I'm going to have that lamp blow up on the set next to the actor. I'm going to literally have pyrotechnics come in there and make that lamp blow up. That would be a practical. And there would be so many things in the uncanny valley that would tell you that was CGI. Whereas if you blow up the lamp next to an actor as a practical, it's going to be completely real and you'll feel it.
Ken, one of the things that always tips the hand to me is the perfection of an effect. The smoke hits exactly the point. The fire is only, everything is so fine-tuned that in essence to me says it's an effect, because with practicals, you could never predict exactly what was going to happen. You could get an idea and hope that the water tower fell on top of the car as it was supposed to.
That's
but
right.
the part of that practicality made it seem more realistic. The fact that you never really knew.
Actors reacting to green screen props have been a problem. They can never really fully interact with a green screen stick waving in the air. The way they can with a something that's real in front of them. And that's a problem. And for that reason, I would always tend to lean toward doing practicals. And when you look at what Jim Henson did with the Muppets and what continues to be a really excellent way to produce those things, those kinds of films, just are unbeatable. I cringed at the thought of doing any of those Muppet films with entirely animation. It would just ruin it to me. And it would
well, and the live action performers had the ability to perform with the actor. They were all on set, all performing to one another. Absolutely. So they had that advantage.
Yes. You're actually talking to a thing, but it's still reacting as an entity that's sentient, and it makes a difference for the actor. Actors react the same way sports people do to crowds. You have the home team advantage because it makes a difference to the energy that the athlete's using to perform. So these different definitions of producers, Randy will give you the link or print them out for you, what co-producers do, supervising producers. These just go into more detail. It just gets down into the minutia of the act of quality control and delegating management of different producers to do those things.
Kent, forgive me if I'm jumping ahead, but when I looked at your list, the one that stands out to me is aside maybe the overall producer being one thing, but what I've been used to, especially in the business of making stuff for broadcast, is the line producer, because they are the people that are there on the front line. It ought to be frontline producer, in my opinion. They are the ones that I feel earn most of their keep. They are the most valuable to a director.
Couldn't agree more.
They are the field marshals. They're the ones who are saying, here's how we're going to get this shot done, and so on. They're not. Yep. They're down in the dirt with us.
They really are. They are the ones on the front lines, and they will move a production along or hold it back, depending on how good they are. That's the second most important person, I think, on a set is the AD, the assistant director. Some people think that means that they assist the director in directing people. No, that's not what they do. They coordinate background. They give background stuff to do to make it look real. They're a secondary line of action for those background people. They collect time cards from actors and make sure all that technical stuff is taken care of. They do mostly. They are the cop on the set, and when you have a good AD on a set, you're going to hear, "What are we waiting on? What's going on?" That one question I found has been so helpful for me throughout my careers. What are we waiting on? Because when you ask that question, many times a set is paralyzed and nobody really knows why. They're not really thinking about each other. And you'll ask that question, what are we waiting on? And usually everybody will say, no, we're ready to go. Why aren't we going?
That's very true. As a director, that's happened hundreds of times.
Hundreds of times. And so a good AD just takes a bullwhip on the set, and you don't have to be there and ask that question. Yeah. They're going to ask that question.
Yeah.
Or if somebody's, a gaffer and a grip are talking, they'll say, take that outside. They'll kind of shame them. We're not here to talk or play. And a lot of times in crews that I've worked with, sorry to say this, but it's true. The cities where there's more work, it's more prevalent, but they will drag their feet in order to create overtime. And they will do things that are subtle, but they're intended to create overtime. I didn't believe this at first. I learned eventually that's true. And an AD, and particularly an AD that comes from that world, knows those tricks and they know how to get around them. There are a million ways in which the people will try to take advantage of you. If you need a generator on a set, which probably isn't needed that much anymore. If the driver just won't get back with you with a rate, it's a week out, you're still not getting a rate. Believe me, what's going to happen, you're going to get that rate 2 days before the shoot, and it's going to be big, and you won't have any choice. They drag, they sandbag, they do everything they can to line up the price. I had a guy on a set once, I'm not bashing unions. I love unions. Unions made our country. They're the reasons we have weekends. Believe me, I'm a big supporter of unions, but I will say sometimes they are their own worst enemies. I had a guy on a set once, union set, come to me and say he wants a meal penalty because those eggs were crap and you know it. And I hired a catering truck and it's professional. This is in LA. The eggs weren't crap. He wanted a meal penalty. Get out of here. Give me a break. I showed up on a set once. We were shooting Michael Eisner and they had shot on this set. The union crew had shot Michael Eisner. And we were going to go on the set and do something with him on that same set after they wrapped for the day. And union foreman came over to me and said, don't touch any of our set dressing. Do not touch any of our lights. We're not here to help you. He said those words exactly to me. I said, okay. I had a guy from Texas doing the lighting, Bill Hayes, I'll go ahead and say his name. And he, had a light meter and looking around. He says, that window behind is way too hot. I said, Bill, it's impossible. This is a big time union crew. It can't be. He said, it is. So we shot a different direction. I learned later they had to come back and reshoot those scenes of Eisner because that background was too hot. And how much does Eisner make an hour? Probably, I don't even know what that costs for them to do. But what I learned in LA, I went there with such intimidation. I learned that there's massive incompetence in that city. Massive. It's unfathomable, the incompetence that I found in that city. Sorry, it's the truth. And so I always encourage people to go there because, believe me, they could stand some help. One of the reasons I think that the problems exist there in that regard is that they're all so insulated. A sound man learns to be a sound man. Here's how he learns his life. Blinders on. In Middle America, people have usually growing up in the business have to do a little of everything because they just had to at some point. You have a little more well-rounded understanding of a set when that happens. And so there's my bashing of Hollywood.
Well, Ken, let me just echo what you're saying. My experience was having learned most of my trade, well, aside from college, of course, here in San Antonio with San Antonio crews and working for the places I worked, you had to learn all of the aspects. One day you'd be running a Nagra recorder and the next day you'd be shooting. And when I went to Hollywood expecting myself to be, the hillbilly of the century, I found that not just me, but those that came from San Antonio or from Texas to Hollywood were leagues ahead of other people on set. Even though they've been doing it for 20 years, they'd only learned, like you say, just that one aspect. So once you sort of understand what all the jobs are, and I would encourage the students to get on live action shoots, get on anything, just volunteer, be as involved as you can, because every minute you spend on a set, even if you're a production assistant, every minute you spend on a set is going to help you whenever you become a professional, whether you're deep in the halls of animation or whether you're a person that's I don't know anyone who started off to be an animator that didn't eventually get involved with live action, whether it's motion capture or shooting reference or whatever. Most people will end up having to be around live action. So you're going to be so much better off if you have a 1 foot, at least you've stuck your toe in the water in live action.
Yeah, but they know what they need.
Don't be intimidated because you're some podunk guy from San Antonio when you're on a set. If you know your craft, you're every bit. In fact, after I got to Hollywood, I was much in the habit of bringing people in from Texas rather than rely on that guy who has that job because his uncle's the head of the guild, which that happens. Nepotism is very real there.
No,
so anyway, it's all about how devoted you are and how deeply you learn your craft to how well you'll do once you get on the rails and start working.
Amen. You're preaching. I'm believing. When you have a little more thorough understanding of everybody's job, it helps you to, as a producer, one of the things you do is you look ahead for problems that haven't arrived and you try to solve those problems before they arrive. And with a little bit of understanding of everybody's role, you can perhaps expedite that set by looking out for those issues. So if you're scouting somewhere and you're with a small team, it's not the team that should be scouting. It never is the team that should be scouting. For the sake of money, don't bring the gaffer, don't bring just go. And, you know, you walk into some place and, oh, isn't this marvelous? You know, you say, well, yeah, but there's a freeway right there. It's really going to affect our sound issues. And, or, you know, it looks great standing here, but these trees and the way the light is dappled, and we're in the middle of summer, it's going to be hot, bright sun here and shade everywhere. So the more you know about the various issues that can arise for various departments, the better off you're going to be in trying to anticipate problems. Because as I mentioned earlier, being a producer is mostly solving problems. And the best way to solve problems is to see them before they arrive, to look ahead and to thoroughly vet things. I think vetting seems to be a process that's so neglected in every respect, but you can't have enough conversations. And I would say, particularly with animation, everybody sees something in the theater of their mind. They're watching the screen and they're seeing whatever it is you're talking about in their mind. And then when they see the actual thing produced, they say, well, that's not the way I saw it. Well, yeah, that's because you were in your own mind. So the way you get around that is you ask for storyboards. Storyboards are invaluable. That reduces the theater of your mind to an actual image that we can talk about. Even then, you need to get into the details. How realistic does it need to be? Does it need to be photorealistic? Do you want this to be like South Park animation? There's a million conversations can be had, and you still will come up short of their expectation. You cannot have enough conversations. You cannot vet things enough. And for this reason, sometimes producers are hated.
Well, you know, Ken, speaking of storyboards, which I consider storyboards directing, because once you have the
Yeah.
storyboard, if you have a tight board, as I call
Yeah,
it,
so did Alfred Hitchcock. That's exactly what he felt.
because
Yeah.
you've got to not only so many times I do my own storyboard, so I go in on a set and I'll say this, and I'll go over. Well, generally we do this long before we go on set. But so many times I've heard someone say, "That's what you had in mind. I had no idea this is the way you're going to do it." But you know, just in talking, they had a completely different conception. Even though I felt that we were effective communicators, when it comes to visuals, you better be looking at this literally on the same page, because the storyboard to me is invaluable. That is 99% of whether your shoots can. And also you can get an idea of, can we do this in one day? How many shots can we get? When you look at that, you know exactly, okay, our camera needs to be back 22 feet and so on. The other thing you mentioned that I would like to amplify too is the importance of anticipation. When you have someone on set, be it especially an assistant director, someone who can anticipate, as we're shooting this thing, they can be setting up the next thing. And therefore you can get so much more done in a day if you have someone who's anticipating, thinking ahead, because especially new people, that's one reason why it's important to have on-set experience. Then you can learn how to anticipate what's likely to happen and so on, because that really helps you. The game is, how much can you get done in a day? At least that was when it came down for me. Of course, you know, you're wanting it to be quality, but the other thing is, if you're especially for shooting, let's say a TV commercial, you got to wrap before sundown. That's that. There's no way around it. So you got to find a way, and generally anticipating is, other than rushing, that's the most important thing you can do.
And I will say that directors in general and directors of photography specifically have no sense of time. They have no clock in their head. In their mind, they have all week to get that shot. The sun's going to just stop in the sky. It's not going to move. And you have to get in their face all the time and say, you know what, burning daylight, gotta move on here. I have a favorite little thing I do on a set. It's nothing original. I picked it up from somebody in Hollywood. It's best done with $100 bills. And you go like this. You're cussing me. You're killing me. You're killing me. You're killing me.
I never saw you do that, kid.
That's well, you know, I save it for those occasions where I'm in deep trouble. You need a little laugh, but you need to.
You got to speak like Regis Philbin as you do it, I guess.
Yes, you got to exactly. That actually.
You're killing me here.
You're killing me. Yeah, what are you doing? But you know, when you think about pre-planning, and storyboard is essential for pre-planning, I think. when you get to the set, 90% of it is over. It really is now going to take a life of its own. And I'm a big believer in second ADs, as Randy pointed out, that can move that set along to the next location and take a little contingent. And if you plan it out ahead of time, you will have enough crew in the lighting department and enough equipment to go light another set while this one's being used. Yeah, will it cost you a little more for that equipment and those people? Yes, but it will save you a lot of money in having to just, wait until you're ready to move and have that company move be a galloping elephant just slugging along. It's
Well,
really
Ken, one
painful.
thing, in a couple of weeks, we're going to have Troy Davis talk to the class about pre-visualization, and Troy's been doing the effects on I can't remember now, the Showtime's Lost in Space for, I think this is his third season.
Troy is terrific.
And he's going to be, he's taught at UIW himself, so he's pretty articulate about this. But he's going to be talking about the importance of pre-visualization and so on. So that's
Troy
right up the alley what you're talking about.
I would refer to him as a visual genius.
Yeah,
I have such respect for Troy Davis. You guys are really going to have a terrific person talking to you there about, and in terms of animation, I don't know of anybody that knows more. And everybody's special too. So, you might have a kind or a type of animation you want to go to somebody else and whatever, but these animators are really gems and they're rare. To find a really great animator is so difficult. I can think of another great animator that I know, but I can only count on two fingers the great animators I know. I mean, I guess if you have all the money in the world, you pick up the phone and you call a massive house like Pixar and
ILM.
One time I called Pixar. I don't even remember why. There was some reason, believe it or not, that I had to talk to somebody there. And I got their phone after hours. And then this was a long time ago, folks, forgive me, back when VHS machines were, it said, the recording started with, if your VCR is blinking 12, call tomorrow and speak to a person. It was just a real quick way of saying, if you're so technologically deficient, you can't figure out how to program your VCR. The joke is being lost in old technology. It's a very old reference, but I thought that was funny. Well, I did a lot of work with the animation department, the promotional side of the animation department at Disney. And Randy was in charge of this kind of work at Paramount. And we did, making ofs, and we shot people, and there was a little, I don't even know what to call it. It wasn't a strip center, but it was the most unassuming offices, where it is on Flower Street, Randy, where the Disney animators work.
Yes, I know what you're talking about.
You just go in and you go almost cubicle to cubicle, and you think to yourself, is this the great Disney animation world? For God's sake. And I remember there was a guy named Glenn Keane, I think his name was. And he had learned from the original animators. And we were shooting him talking. He was doing the Little Mermaid at the time. And he was the key guy on it. And he had a stack of drawings. I don't know, he's probably not that thick, seemed like that thick. And and it was just pencil drawings at the time. And he flipped through it for us, and I'm with my video camera looking at it. And he flipped through it with such precision, I could swear he even got the frame rate precise. And then he did the voice. And it was a sequence of a cat crawling up an actress's arms. So he's flipping through this and doing this voice at the same time, and you're watching this cat crawl up the arm with all the expression and everything else you see in Disney movies. It was quite a moment. It put the hair up on my arms to think I'm standing in the presence of such genius. This was at a time when they were using CGI in one of those rooms, not to actually do the animation, but to plot the way the room should move around in Beauty and the Beast. They employed in those days early primitive CGI to almost
pin and
be
plotter
like
system.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And that was the early motion system they had, and they just used it to, let the animator see how to make that really happen. It was quite an evolution, quite an interesting evolution. And when Pixar came on the screen, history was made. Things changed overnight practically. I don't know if you guys had the same experience, but when I saw Toy Story, I was just blown away. The level of control they had, and the way, as we talked about earlier, technology didn't overwhelm the story. The story was paramount, and they brought those characters to such life, to such realistic life, that it sold it 100%. And everything they've done since, I think, is terrific.
You know, I would only add to that if it weren't for Lasseter's obsession with toys. I don't know if many people know this, but he was a real toy fanatic. And he had the idea of let's animate toys, because at that time, CGI was nowhere near ready to do human. I mean, they did little glimpses of it, and you saw how awkward that was. But when it's a stiff little plastic toy articulated, they pulled it off beautifully. Then they could rely on facial expressions and so on to do the acting. But that was the smartest thing I've ever seen, is the fact that they were smart enough to make these their character design toys.
Yeah, I didn't know that. It makes perfect sense, and what a great transition. And to this day, it's stuck. I mean, they're still in that world of dragons or whatever. It's rare that they try to do something like Robert Rodriguez did recently with what was the name of that movie he had where he brought the girl to life. But they don't normally stay in that. They stay in the sphere of Toy Story. They stay in the sphere of non-humans mostly. And if they're humans, they're just going to be character animated humans that are obviously not humans, like Pinocchio.
They've been too smart to try and do human endeavors so far. I mean,
I just think it's
they're staying within what I call the CalArts look. They've been there for forever, and they may never get outside of CalArts style, but that's fine. It works. It works,
and I believe they thought they were looking at a children's audience. So what does it matter? You know, they don't need to have. They want to stay in the fantasy world. I don't believe those movies are the demographic of strictly children anymore.
Oh, no.
I believe it's
and they probably have the highest joke per minute count of anything. I mean, when you think of computer graphic movies, have so many jokes flying at you that some are bound to hit. You know,
and different levels of
yes,
joke. Levels of appealing to adults.
Double entendres and so on.
And they won't find it. But kids can just watch the movie, and adults can watch it and enjoy it as well. But I think that I don't know that you'll have any students in this class who are thinking, "Gee, I want to be a producer. That's why I'm here and doing this." Maybe it's the furthest thing from your mind, and God bless you. You're probably a smart person for thinking that. But if you end up in the role one day of being a producer, you'll find that it's a thankless job. Everybody can do it better than you, and they will tell you that to your face. And don't let it bother you. Vet things as best you can, and learn, to nod your head and say, "Well, that's a valid point." And you say things like that, and they understand that you've thought that through probably. When you're working with a producer, and just have a little bit of that understanding that role is a thankless job, and it's a near impossible job to fulfill.
Ken, I'd like to add to that, and this is probably you're the best example I know of this. Excuse me, because I've worked with I probably would say hundreds of producers along the way, but at least several dozen. The ones that bring the most to my sets are the ones who stay calm. They bring tranquility rather than create or escalate. They're the people who calm people down. And you've always had in fact, I've told you this before, you've had a calming factor on a set, not just for the people on the crew, but for the clients who are freaking out about the fact, I don't know if you remember on the Schlitterbahn shoot, the yellow umbrellas were not out on some big shoot. And we're thinking, you're kidding. They're obsessing over the yellow umbrellas not being fully extended. But the nice thing about that is that when you're, especially if you're a director, you're dealing with everything else, and the last thing you want is a producer to come out and start screaming or yelling. So is bringing calm and tranquility is and stay the course. Stay steady through the whole day. You can you can panic or get drunk that night, but at least the whole time you're on set, staying the course is a huge asset to the production.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that good word. And I, you know, you are dealing usually with people who, let's face it, people who choose our field, they may be living in their child more than their adult. Let's be honest. And so you're going to have to be the parent a lot. And I've known some people throughout my career. I've seen it happen more than once, where people will create a problem just to solve it so they can be the hero. And you got to watch that process, let it play out. Just say to yourself, well, that's what they needed to do, and not let it drive you crazy. Make a mental note not to hire that person again. But, you know, there's only so much you can do when all goes crazy on a set. I was shooting a video press kit for Summer Rental, which was a John Candy movie in Florida. And we were one scene we're shooting, the director and the helicopter had released a dummy that had been thrown in the scene. A person was supposed to be thrown out of a helicopter. And here comes the dummy out of the helicopter, and the dummy starts to fly apart in midair, just stuffing coming out, and it was obviously a dummy. And the director looks over at the art director looks over at the director and says, well, here we are saving money. And that's true. You know, penny wise, dollar foolish. Know the price of everything and the value of nothing.
Well, Ken, you brought up an interesting point. And I don't mean this in a demeaning way, but when you said a lot of the people in this business are living more in their child phase than their adult phase, I think that's very astute, because I think people that are drawn to this industry are drawn in part to the fantasy side of it. The fact that, to me, it was literally, the word animate means to create life in Latin. Yeah. And I've, ever since flip books as a kid, I've been amazed at the fact that you can, I used to do a lecture about animation. I talk about everyone in this room knows who Bugs Bunny is, knows what Bugs Bunny's attributes are. Is he likely to take that or leave it on the table? Daffy Duck would be doing, we know these people, we know these characters, and to some large degree they are alive in a sense, at least in our mentality. But I've definitely worked with people who definitely were more in the child phase than the adult phase. And I'm not saying that disparagingly. Thank God we've got guys like John Lasseter at Pixar, and I know he's run into some bad public relations in the last few years, but that kind of fantasy world, if you will, or whatever, is what brings the spark and the humanity very often to working with these people. Yeah. and so on. So I enjoy a mix of adults with the child. You don't want to have all of one and all the other, but it's nice to have both sides on a project.
I would suggest a good therapist is always a helpful aid to a producer. And I've had my share of therapy, and I remember one therapist told me, Ken, you should strive to live in the adult 100% of the time, because you'll make it there about 10% if you try. And his theory was, all of us, and this is everybody, at any given moment in time, we're either in our adult, a child, or a parent. Those are the three roles we interchange back and forth. And sometimes a parent is needed, but a parent in a lecturing tone and a yelling tone, sometimes it's better to just take the most of the time. The adult is going to be the one where the cooler heads prevail and create, as you point out, calming on the set. It's going to be the adult. How would an adult handle this problem and situation? And you move on from there. Mm-hmm. I don't know that I have any other pearls, if I had any pearls in there at all. Maybe with a Teamster joke. You know how many Teamsters it takes to screw in a light bulb?
No.
100. You got a problem with that?
Did I tell you my Paramount story about the time I was doing taking some people around on a VIP tour? I was their one and only tour guide for years, and a big truck was blocking the way. This is when they were shooting a picture called "Coming to America," a Eddie Murphy picture.
Oh yeah, I love that film.
I couldn't get past the truck that was blocking the main road, and so I went up and knocked on the cab door. and woke up a Teamster, and he filed a grievance on me for waking him up. That's my favorite union story.
No, you can't make that up. You can't make that up.
Anybody else would go, "Are you kidding?" Except someone who's been in Hollywood and knows that that's the craziness.
Absolutely.
Of it.
Absolutely.
Well, Ken, I better let you
All right,
go.
buddy.
I can't thank you enough. Thanks so
Well,
much,
good luck
Ken. I
with
really
your class,
appreciate it.
and I'm glad you're doing what you're doing. Hopefully these kids will enjoy some aspect of our crazy world and find their way.
Well, I sure do appreciate you doing this for me. Thank you, Ken.